Onside. It's Friday. The weekend starts here, and as you can see, there's an extra box. We've got Mr. George Watson, our Burnley man. It's a very, very, very nerve-wracking day for our George because Burnley are playing later on this evening. We are shooting around just after 5, so hopefully this might come out before. But if it doesn't, you may know the results, so you may know whether George is depressed or is delighted. But that will soon to be found out. So, George, how are you, sir?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me on again. I feel like part of the furniture recently.
And
I thought you were going to say when you said if he's going to be depressed, delighted. I thought you were going to use another word, deluded. But maybe that's
I've been told that.
He was at the start of the season, yeah.
He was when he was calling for like back-to-back wins for Burnley and what have you. But
I said 9 points. We ended up with 7. It wasn't that horrific of a shout.
Yeah, pretty decent. So great to have you as always, George. OS, how are you, my friend? It's been quite an eventful day for you today. Would you like to explain to the viewers what sort of day you've had?
No, not really. No, okay. Final day at work today, 12th of January. A lot of well wishes at work, which was very much appreciated. It's always nice, isn't it, when people mean really well and say goodbye and their kind of final thoughts. But yeah, no, emotional, but hopefully on to better chapters ahead. But yeah, I'll miss seeing your ugly mug every day, Ayub. But hopefully the podcast.
yeah. I was going to sort of say that you're not spared. You're going to see it twice a week. Just for our viewers, for those who don't know, OS is moving to warmer climes. He's moving to Dubai next week. He's got a big gig over there, so. But we will be carrying on, and he'll be shooting from Dubai. I'm not sure about the hours, what the difference is. It's about 3 hours, 4 hours, but. It's all right for me because we'll be shooting at the same time, but maybe for us it will be a little bit difficult. So a huge loss to the business, but career and all that, yeah. So
nobody wants to hear about all that, Ayub. Let's get on to the football chatter.
Right, we'll talk about the football, but before we do that, let me ask for the usual good stuff. Smash a like, share with your friends, do all the good stuff. But before we do even the show, I met one of our regular viewers, Onside. I don't know whether you know him, OS, but he asked for a shout out. I was going to give him a shout out last game. He actually watched the whole show, and he never got a shout out, so he was really disappointed. So I'm going to give him a shout out at the start of the show. I've got a feeling that he'll listen to this and then switch off. But he's a Liverpool fan, hardcore Liverpool fan. I did ask him where he thinks Liverpool are going to finish. And I was slightly surprised. I was thinking he was going to be an optimistic Liverpool fan, but he's saying second. He's actually fearing Manchester City, especially with KDB coming back. So we might touch upon that this show, but if not, certainly we're going to pick it up later on. But today's a George's Day, not St. George's Day, but our George Watson's Day. It's a huge day, evening fixture. We're making this a relegation special. And who better to talk about relegation than George? So Burnley are in the mix at this moment in time. To many observers, George, it looks like Burnley are doomed. As a Burnley fan, what's the word on the street in Burnley?
Pretty blind optimism, you might want to call it. I'm not sure. We were dead and buried 5-6 games ago, and we've somehow strung a few results together, and we seem to be, with a victory tonight, we can go a point from safety with Everton to play Aston Villa, I think, which is no gimme by any means. It's a huge game tonight. Everyone knows it's a huge game. I'm probably the most nervous I've been this season, but yeah, our home form, we've been playing well recently. I think we've been playing really well recently. So it's got some optimism, depending on injuries, because I know we've got a few knocks to Charlie Taylor and Lyle Foster. So yeah, we'll see.
When we spoke in the morning, and I sort of talked about that if you don't get, I mean, it's a must win, isn't it? Really, I mean,
100%.
And I don't even think a draw is going to be a good result. So if the worst does happen, if you don't get the result, and if you end up sort of losing to Luton, do you resign yourself to the fact that it's over?
Yeah, I think so. It's going to be too hard with obviously not closing the gap on Luton, and you've got your teams that are sort of pulling away. Like Forest have had the new manager bounce, could come to a close soon, but they look better than they were anyway. You got Brentford who look to be sliding, but Ivan Toney's coming back. So yeah, it seems to be do or die. Our next 3 games we've got Luton at home, City away, which is you just write it off. Then we've got Fulham at home. So there is a possibility of 6 points in the next 3 games, which would put us well in the mix to possibly stay up. But it's in our hands.
Yeah, I'd have to double check the fixtures, but I think you might have Sheffield United after that. Maybe I think if I recollect.
No, I don't think. No, we've got. But we're at home to Luton, away at City, home to Fulham, and then we've got Liverpool and Arsenal.
Oh my
Oof.
goodness me!
Oof.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh,
so
that's painful. That's painful.
but Arsenal at the minute, it's anything could happen. So
Yeah, I think George is absolutely right, isn't he? In terms of where you started, you were dead and buried, and I think you are in with a chance. It could have been done and dusted. The start that Burnley had to the start of the season was woeful. I can't remember one pundit suggesting that they were going to have any chance of getting out of this. So much to the credit of Vincent Company and the kind of whole squad, really, that they've been quite competitive for the most part. You mentioned earlier, I think 7 points from the last 7 games, and also a few unlucky. I mean, I thought against Liverpool, to be fair, Liverpool were the better team and in the end polished it off. But Villa was obviously a difficult one to swallow with that penalty
don't
at
get me
the.
started on that Villa game.
We'll maybe get into that, but no. But I think the fact that they are, I think before you can have any chance of survival, I've mentioned this all the time. You've got to be competitive in games, and Burnley have suddenly started to be competitive, and it sometimes does. I think for uh, promoted clubs, I think, as well as what was a relatively young team that company persevered with for the most part, especially early on, much to it came under a lot of criticism from not just Burnley faithful, but also a lot of pundits in the wider footballing fraternity that he really probably needs to bring some of these experienced pros in. George is probably better equipped to speak about that than I am. But I think the fact is they are competitive right now. They are competing. They're in games similar to what Luton have been for the most part of the season. It probably explains why Luton are currently above them. I think earlier you misspoke, George. It allows them today with a win to close the gap on Luton. They'd still be a good few points plus really inferior goal difference to Everton. So 2 points behind Everton. So even with a win, there's still a lot of work
Yeah,
to do. The issue is, as you rightly pointed out, I think anything but a victory tonight. It feels, I mean, it's second week of January, but it does feel when you look at the kind of the gaps, the points, and the fact Everton have a home game, that would also put Luton, obviously, depending on it, obviously, if Burnley lose today, that would put Luton quite a sizable gap. And I just wonder what it would do to Burnley's kind of psyche and psychology in terms of having one of your nearest rivals, and the fact that there were so many more points superior to Luton going into, as of the Championship last year. So I think you're right. It can't be understated how big a game this is for Burnley, and I think you're right on this one. I do think it's a must-win. To be fair.
Just on the point before you go, George, you picked up a point I was going to talk about, because the gap between Burnley and Luton last season, I'm not sure. I mean, what was it, George? How many points between you and Burnley come the end of end of the season last year?
well, Luton. I think we finished.
I think it was 20 plus.
Yeah, we finished about 16 in front of Sheffield United, who were in second. So it's got to be 20 plus, because there were another quite sizable gap between Sheffield United and third. So
21 points. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's the frustrating part if I was a Burnley fan, because Luton, I mean, obviously, I wrote them off at the start of the season, and they've obviously adapted. Now they're still in the relegation mix, so it's not as if we're talking about a team that's mid-table, but they've obviously adapted to playing in the Premier League much better than Burnley, because they've obviously identified what the best way to play is. Because I can't recall them being battered. They've lost many games, but they've certainly not been battered. And always sort of says that if you're in games, there's always an opportunity, there's always a chance. So Rob Edwards was obviously worked on a strategy to play in the Premier League. Now Vincent Kompany is he obviously has a style of philosophy which clearly isn't working, or has worked on occasions. Are you still confident that Kompany is the man?
Yeah, 100%. I was saying this earlier today as well. Even if it comes to going down, I'd still keep him. He's proven that he knows how to get out of the Championship with the football that he played. We were miles ahead of any team. Albeit people might say that it were a bit of a weak Championship, but I'd still stack us up against anybody down there now. He's the man for me. I can't really say much more about it.
But how do you think that he's done in the Premier League? Because obviously he was exceptional. Because you'd won the league by February, by March. So in terms of how he's approached playing in the Premier League, bearing in mind there's a huge gulf between the Championship and the Premier League. What's your thought? I mean, this is why I'm curious to find out, because I, as a fan, will be a little bit disappointed, because you've got to adapt. You've got to respect the league that you're playing in. It's almost as if he's in a bizarre sort of way disrespecting the league. I mean, Rob Edwards has done a fantastic job. I mean, I'm not sure how Luton played last season, but they've been much more pragmatic. They've obviously, I mean, was alluded to the point. They've got some experience. They've got Ross Barkley in. They've got Townsend, who obviously was somebody that Burnley know well. So they've obviously thought about it long and hard, how to tackle the Premier League. Company seems to be a guy who's just. It almost seems that he's carrying on playing in the Championship.
I don't know. I think the first few games were a bit of a write-off, and it wasn't good by anybody's standards. But I don't think that was wholly down to what he was doing. I think it was wholly down to, well, sorry, not wholly down, but partly down to the fact of how many new players we'd signed. And you can see, like, the last time I was on, I was saying that people like Sander Berg, and they were buying into it, and they looked like they were starting to get it, and the penny was starting to drop. And then after that shot, when I said that I think we could get 9 points, we went and got 7 points. But the thing is, even when we are losing, the manner in which we're losing, it's streets ahead of what we were, because we were losing games before 3-4-0, and you're out the game by half time. But even against Liverpool, it were 1-0 until the 90th minute. Like, there was always a chance you're still in the game.
Yeah.
So yeah. I think the penny's dropped with a lot of the players as well. So that's why you don't hear a lot of noise around when we're losing games playing the style that we are, because you can see it's working, or in part that it's starting to work, and it's giving us a chance.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I'll push back on there, Ayub, is you talk about Luton adapting, and you're right. I mean, look, the argument was before the season started, Luton were dead certs that to go down. But currently, as of today, the 3 promoted teams are getting relegated, and that's how it should be. And what I mean by should be is that they are, by definition, the 3 worst teams when the league starts. I mean, that's just, it is what it is. That's how the hierarchy works within the footballing league. Now, that's not to say that, as per your team, that in the first season of getting promoted, that you can, a bit similar to what Brentford, I think, achieved as well. You can upset the norm and finish in the top half of the table as you did. But then there's also something to be said about sometimes the first season, you take a few teams by surprise. There's not much maybe tape, and it takes a bit of time, right? And then teams start to get a bit of a key on you. And suddenly kind of work yourselves out, especially if you're not strengthening. I think Burnley, George, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's taken them a bit of time. I mean, Luton perhaps had it. I mean, they did get smacked by Brighton early doors, but after that, they've worked at kind of hard staying games. I think they also lost 2-0 very comfortably at Stamford Bridge. Yes, it wasn't a battering, but it was pretty much, in terms of chances created by Chelsea, quite profitably in front of goal. But I think Burnley with company early on, the worry was, I think for a lot of Burnley fans, was that this season was going to be over before it began. Where it's like we worked so hard to get into the Championship, won the Championship to get into the Premiership. We won the Championship at Cantor. You knew, as you said, you know you've got promoted Feb. He bought the team back early in pre-season, one of the kind of earliest teams, I think, if not the earliest, in terms of bringing them back in early to get ready on kind of pre-season fitness. And then it's just, you just lose game after game after game, get smacked home and away, and you're probably relegated by game week 15, 16 if you don't turn it around. Credit to Company. He's obviously not got the experience in the Premier League. He's learning on the job. I think we have to cut him some slack. You just can't expect him to be a ready-made top-class manager. He's going to have to take his lumps and learn as he goes along. So I think what you're seeing is signs of some growth from the manager, the coach, but also some of these players, because it takes a bit of time getting used to the pace, understanding how to hurt teams, all the rest of it. I think they're in with a shot. I think this game here, though, is that kind of fork in the road, isn't it? Where it's now a case of this is our chance to seize the initiative and get in amongst those teams, let's say, and maybe Villa can do you a favour against Everton and what have you. But if it goes the other way, then a lot of that good work you feel will be for nothing. And imagine the fillip it'll give Luton because they've been on a half decent run recently.
Not to mention the game in hand that they've still got against Bournemouth as well, the replayed
Yeah.
fixture.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course.
Absolutely. You let me ask you a cheeky question. As it currently stands, obviously you've got designs with Leeds being in the Premier League next season. Would you prefer Burnley to stay in the Premier League, as you might think you've got a better chance of picking up 4.6 points, or do you think they're one of the teams you'd probably like to see the back of?
No, I'd like to see Burnley stay in the Premier League, and there's a reason why. I mean, we tend to do better against teams that play on the front foot, and Burnley play football. Teams that have low blocks, and I think are pragmatic, who are trying to eke out a result, we're always struggling with. So certainly, I think in terms of who I would fancy our chances with, or Burnley. I mean, Burnley obviously at the moment they're a better side. They're in the Premier League. But I would certainly say that if we got to the Premier League, I'd rather play a Burnley than at the moment Luton or a Sheffield United, because they're quite sort of turgid sides, and those are the sides that we struggle with. So and for Georgie's sake as well, I want them to be in the Premier League, and then we can have a head-to-head.
Yeah, I think the challenge for Burnley a little bit is the goal difference as well. I mean, you're not reversing that if it comes down to goal difference against one. I mean, Forest have the next worst in terms of the teams outside of the relegation zone. So I think the goal difference is going to be hard to reverse. I think even at this stage, they're going to have to just pick up some wins. But again, a huge game. It's hard to see which teams can be dragged back into it. George, we've had this discussion offline. Which teams you feel? Obviously, Everton have done a great job given the minus 10-point deduction as well. Brentford, obviously on the worst run in the league, but obviously they get Tony back, although they've got a lot of injuries. So you probably need one or two of those teams to, again, continue with poor form, and you need a big win today. If you get a big win, and I think some of those teams drop a little bit, it gives you a bit more of a chance, doesn't it, in terms of catching more than just one opponent?
Yeah, definitely. With the win tonight, we got to 14 points, and then suddenly your team's in 14th, 15th for only 6 points away. So anything can change. But yeah, without a win tonight, it's impossible, I think, unfortunately.
As it currently stands, based on the average, 31 points would keep you in the league. Based on the average, Luton have got
20
50
points.
Yeah, so another 20 points seems a lot right now, George, but
Yep.
hopefully maybe 17 for your sake after tonight. But no, you've obviously, like you said, you've played a game extra than Luton as well, which is why it makes it all the more important. But what you think, who are your, just ignore that George is here, but who do you think are the three most likely to go down? What do you reckon?
Well, firstly, just looking at the table, I'm looking at the table now. Really, it's from 15th sort of downwards. Nottingham Forest on 20 points, and really from there. So it's either Forest. I mean, Brentford have got a huge shot in the arm with Tony.
Well, why do you not include Palace?
I just don't think. I know it's. I don't know, for some reason they've been there, they've done it, and they seem to be a side always sort of hovers there or thereabouts. They're in the position that they should be, and I just sort of think they're too used to being in that position. They know what it takes. They'll get a run of results. They've got players with a little bit of flair, a little bit of magic, that'll pull out some results. That's at least what I think.
Yeah, just on that though, I think. Yeah, listen, I do agree with you. I think Palace. But when we think about Palace, we think, yeah, typical Roy Hodgson team. Not much creativity going forward generally, other than the fact they've got two really nice players that probably won't be there next year. And when you think about Elise and Eze, and both were, I think, kind of subject to bids in the summer, Chelsea and City respectively. But Elise is out most likely and going to miss a few games with this hamstring injury, which I think is a huge miss for them. If they don't have him at the Emirates, they'll miss him. Eze is just back and kind of coming back to full fitness. I'm with you. I think they probably just still have enough just because of that know-how, but they're not a team that's going to blow too many teams away. So I still would put them in there at 21 points. Fulham probably just have too many at this stage anyway.
If you forced me at the moment, I'd probably sort of say Forest, Luton, Burnley, Sheffield United. Out of
Can I
those 4 teams, 3 of them will get relegated.
Oh, come on, are you?
just
Nail it down to 3.
just back onto the point as well? I think we're missing a key factor as well for the next 4 or 5 weeks is the Africa Cup of Nations as well. Because Forest have lost 7 players to that, 5 of which started against Manchester United.
Which
So-
is why they're in my
Yeah,
in the 4 teams that I've said.
I think Burnley and Manchester City the only 2 teams not losing anybody to AFCON. So that could you take when you're down there, you take any sort of advantage you can get.
Yeah.
So
And it's huge. I mean,
yeah.
you're always talking about if teams buy players who are part of the African nations, that's their fault.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a case of, I mean, it's not that so much it's their fault. It's just I wouldn't be mourning about it. I mean, that goes into selecting that player in the first place. If you're gonna select a squad that's got a high percentage of players that will leave halfway through the season for various national competitions, that's not something for fans to crow about. That's my only comment, because the clubs it didn't become Congolese or Paraguay. He didn't assume that citizenship halfway through the year. So that's my point. The same goes for Liverpool fans with Salah. I'm not saying they are mourning and groaning. I'm just saying it is what it is. You make a good point about Forest. I just wonder how many games they would actually miss. Obviously, they've got the 3rd round replay against Blackpool, then a couple of Premier League games, home to Arsenal coming up as well. So no doubt they would miss some of those players. I just think it's not about one game, but when I watched them against United, I thought, yeah, I mean, I know United, they lose every other game, but they did look a good outfit for the most part. And I think once the manager's got, again, a little bit more time to work with them, I'd still, you're right, they're in the mix, but I would probably put them as outsiders for the time being. I still think, unfortunately, the bottom 3 as it stands are probably most likely to get relegated. Sorry, George, just simply because.
we deserve it. We deserve.
I think
to be written off at this stage.
Burnley, yeah, at this stage exactly, and I think a win today could reverse that. And again, I just wonder whether they've just left themselves too much to do, because they'll still take a few more spankings before the season ends, unfortunately. But it's just a case of if they can pick up some of those wins around themselves and maybe pick up the odd victory. Luton are the ones where they seem to have rolled out. Or kind of been buoyed. I say buoyed, and I say that respectfully, from the whole Tom Lockyer fallout and what have you, and seems to have galvanized the group. It's also a feel-good story. I feel like a lot of neutrals, not that it matters, I've assumed Luton as their kind of second team a little bit. It feels like a feel-good story for the most part. I know Ayub has, so that's been a bit of a 180 since the start of the year. But I'd probably have to say just right now, but again, today can change all that. But I think right now, the bottom, I mean, Sheffield United look dead certs, unfortunately. But I think Burnley and Luton still, I would just say, probably most likely, to be honest.
Well, I'm going to give you mine. There is a caveat. I think if Luton do beat Burnley today, Luton will stay up. I think it will be Forest who will take their place. But as it stands, I'm going to go with the bottom 3. But really, today's result is absolutely pivotal. It's so huge that depending on which side wins, or depending if Luton win, if Luton do win, I think they'll the confidence that will give them, they'll be very near Forest. They'll be out of the bottom 3, which is always psychological, which is a huge fillip to any team that's hovering at the bottom. I certainly know that as a fan, that's what I always thought. As soon as we were out the bottom 3, it gave you optimism. So I would, at the moment, I'd say the bottom 3 as it stands. But really, if Luton do beat you today, George, I reckon they'll escape. So, what's your thoughts? Who come the end of the season, who do you reckon is going to be at the bottom 3?
Oh, I did say Forest, so I think I'll stick to my guns on Forest. Brentford are sliding. Completely depends how Tony comes back, I think, and obviously they've got Mbeumo to come back, who's a really good player. Yeah, Everton have hit a poor run. Depends what happens to him in January, because I can see Onana linked with Arsenal quite heavily. So, and I don't know if they'll be too scared or even allowed to spend any of the money if they get any from him. Yeah, I think it's hard to gauge with Forest, because it's really hard to read a new manager bounce. You don't know what is genuinely the play that is going to stick, or what is just the couple of wins that you do tend to get when a new manager comes in. So Forest are an interesting one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think I'm surprised. I mean, we all seem to have a fair bit of respect for Brentford and Evan Toney, that we think that they probably will just have enough. He's obviously a class striker, won't be there next season. But just you're right. You mentioned it. How does he come back? Is he? They're gonna have to bring him in sooner rather than later. Obviously, he's been training behind kind of closed doors. I think there was a friendly. He's got a hat trick and all the rest of it. But that's one thing. And then the Premier League is another beast altogether. So it'll be really interesting to see how he comes out. They really need him to come back fit and firing. You mentioned Burma, him and Tony struck up a great partnership, obviously over the previous seasons. If they can get those two firing, they've got enough. I'd have to think so. They've got enough. They're a good footballing team when they've got everyone on the pitch. I still believe definitely better than some of the other teams. But it just got. I hate to say it comes back down to tonight. It's such a huge game. I can't.
Yeah,
it's such a huge game.
But then the thing is, if we win tonight, then we have exactly the same conversation when we play Fulham in a few weeks' time. It's just we've got a lot of cup finals coming up.
Yeah, but I think up until now, where you've been, say, cut adrift previously. I mean, you spent the first 10 games rooted right at the bottom.
I don't know. I think it's similar to the Sheffield United game. I think in terms of magnitude, because we were all saying if we can't beat Sheffield United, then we were completely written off. I mean, we did beat Sheffield United, granted, but and we also went and got a point at Brighton and 3 points at Fulham. So
I just wonder about the mentality where if they were to lose today and Everton beat Villa over the next couple of days, that is 8 points and a massively inferior goal difference. So that's 9 points. That's 3 wins. At this stage, 3 wins feels like a lot.
Agreed.
So I think it could break them. But again, got the opportunity to address that tonight in front of the home faithful. Should be huge.
Should be a cracking game. I mean, myself and Otis, we're going to be out for a meal, but we're going to keep an eye on the game. It's going to be exciting. It's a huge game, and I don't want to quite sort of say that it will define sort of who stays up, who goes down, but it does have that feel, doesn't it? It sort of feels so
definitely
monumental that I can understand why you're so nervous. So on that note, we'll let you sort of relax for a little while before you.
Well, hang on. Let's put his feet to the fire. You come on. Predictions. Come on, we know how this works.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. George, we'll let you go as the guest. You go on. What's your predictions for tonight?
2-0.
Obviously for Burnley.
2-0. 2-0 Burnley. Yeah, I'm not that down and out yet, where I start predicting other team wins.
Lewis.
Tough one. Sorry, George. I'm going to go for a draw. Score draw 1-1.
I've got I want Burnley to win, but I've just got this feeling that the way that Luton have been playing, I think they'll eke out a 2-1 victory. And I think if they do eke out a 2-1 victory, it's going to be
2-0, 1-1, 2-1 Luton.
Yeah.
4-3.
And usually I'm always wrong, George. So this is actually
it's a good thing. Yeah. Burnley will thrash them 5-0 now. Watch.
Honestly, it completely depends who plays, because we've had a few injury scares at the Tottenham game, the cup game we had last Friday. So and apparently the physios told company not to say anything on injuries in the press conference. So I'm not really sure what to make of that. But I think if Lyle Foster plays, we've every chance, because he's been a class act for us this season.
Yeah, and there's just one final point. I don't want to read too much into little things here and there, but I just thought against Villa to be away from home, to score with 10 men, to probably look like they were going to eke out a draw. Again, lost narrowly against Spurs in the cup. They look like there's just something there. There's a little bit more substance, a little bit more kind of competition. So I'm hopeful. Today the problem is obviously the pressure ratchets up, right? Burnley are expected at home to win the game, so there's a lot of pressure, let's be clear, and that doesn't always work so well, let's say. But I think if they maybe get one early, that should steady the nerves. But going for that draw, unfortunately.
Well, the nerves are frayed, certainly for George. So we wish you all the best, George. Hopefully it's a nice, enjoyable evening, not too stressful. myself and Owen, we're going to follow this game, so certainly we'll be aware of what the scores are.
You'll be following one way or another because I'll be blowing up your WhatsApp as it goes on as well. So.
All right. On that note, I think we'll call it a day. It is Friday. Things to do and all that kind of stuff. So, George, as always, it's an absolute pleasure. Hopefully, we'll see you soon. Hopefully, we'll see you in a position where perhaps you're a lot more optimistic. I know you're still optimistic, but it's struggling. I am sure it's struggling.
It's the hope that kills you.
I know, as a Leeds fan, I absolutely know. So, we'll see you soon. Hopefully, it's a good result today. OS, as always, great to speak to you. We'll catch up next week. We'll see sort of what's happening. Obviously, it's a truncated Premier League program, so we'll pick it up again next week. We've got some big fixtures coming next week, so we'll pick that up. All right. So, as always, viewers, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure. Have a great weekend. We look forward to seeing you soon. So, until then, see you.